Hey, this is Aaron.
And Blake, we're AB Data.
Thanks for walking through this Alteryx weekly challenge with us.
In this video, we're taking a look at weekly challenge number 222, where there's a whale, there's a way. So for this challenge, we're going to use some data sets to analyze migration movements for different whale species. I hit the run button so that the data would pull through. We have three different files. Whale migration data has our migration patterns, along with a whale pod ID, or a whale ID, excuse me. Whale pods has a list of whale IDs and pod IDs, and then whale species has information about the whale species in each pod. We'll look at that in a minute. For the problem, we're going to find the total number of kilometers each pod swam for each year, then the average number of kilometers each whale in that pod swam. Then we're going to find the pod with the highest average kilometers swam per whale for each species in the year. So let's take a look at our data here. Our first data set, we've got a whale ID, a day, a year in kilometers. Our next one, just a whale ID and a pod ID, and our third one, a pod ID and a whale species. We can go ahead and delete these browse tools. They just take up memory and will slow down our process. If we take a look at the output, we'll see that we've got whale species, pod ID, year, some kilometers, whales in pod, and average kilometers per whale. So let's start by grabbing a join tool and starting to put our three data sets together. So first up, we're going to take our whale ID, we're going to match it to whale ID and deselect our duplicate field so that we just have the new pod ID joined on. I'm also going to change my kilometers to a double data type so I can sum it up here in a minute. Next up, we're going to tag on that whale species name based on the pod ID. So again, we're going to join based on pod ID and then deselect that right pod ID. And last up, we're going to use the summarize tool to create our summary. And so we're going to group by a couple different fields here. We're going to group by the year. We're going to group by the whale species. And then we're also going to group by our pod ID because we want each of those. So for each year, each pod, and each whale species, which the whale species in the pod will still group up. That's a higher level grouping there. We also want to sum up the number of kilometers, and then we want to find the number of whales in each of these pods. So we're going to count the distinct whale IDs so that we get the number of whales in the pod, and we'll even rename this field in our summarize tool as whales in pod. So let's go ahead and hit the run button. I'm going to cache and run this workflow so that we don't have to read the data in repeatedly, and it'll speed things up in future runs. So looking at our data here, we've got our whales in pod, our whale species, all that. We're going to create our new calculated field. So we're going to add a column here. We'll call it kilometers per whale. Each individual whale, this is on average, so we'll do some kilometers divided by the whales in the pod. We'll go ahead and make this a numeric field as well, just in case. After that, we'll go ahead and we'll sort our data so that we'll have it in the order that we want it, which is kilometers per whale descending. And then last up, we need to use a sample tool to figure out which one of our pods had the highest kilometer per whale average in each year. So we're going to do our first one row. We're going to group by whale species and year. We'll tag a browse here onto the end, evaluate our results. Looks like we've got 876 at the top of each of our lists, 969, on and on.
Thank you for learning with us today. Good luck on your Alteryx journey.
For more information on custom training, managed service automations, and more, please visit our website at abdataconsulting.com.